She was born into a world that did not pause to welcome her. The day she arrived, the sky was heavy with rain, and the house she was born into was already crowded with unspoken worries, unpaid debts, and silences that felt older than anyone living there. From her earliest memories, she learned that love was not always loud or gentle. Sometimes it was survival, sometimes it was absence, and sometimes it was something you had to imagine existed because you needed to believe it did. She learned early how to stay quiet, how to read the room, how to make herself small so that the storms around her would pass without noticing her too much. What she didn't know then was that these lessons, learned in fear, would later become the roots of a strength she hadn't yet discovered. As a child, she watched others with a kind of distant curiosity. She noticed how some kids laughed freely, how their parents' voices sounded warm instead of sharp, how their homes felt lighter when she visited. Returning to her own space always felt like stepping into colder air. There were arguments that echoed through thin walls, promises that were made and broken before the words even settled, and nights when sleep refused to come because the future felt too uncertain to dream about. She grew up faster than she should have, carrying responsibilities that did not belong to her, learning to cook, to clean, to care, while quietly setting aside her own needs as if they were luxuries she couldn't afford. School was both an escape and a battlefield. She loved learning, loved the way books could take her to places where pain had no power and possibilities felt endless. But school was also where she learned how cruel the world could be to those who were already wounded. She was teased for her worn clothes, for the way she flinched at sudden noises, for the seriousness in her eyes that didn't match her age. Teachers saw potential but also noticed the exhaustion she tried to hide. Some offered kindness that stayed with her for years. Others dismissed her quiet struggle as laziness or lack of effort. Every small failure felt enormous because she believed she was always one mistake away from confirming everyone's worst expectations of her. At home, things grew heavier as she grew older. Financial stress turned into emotional distance, and emotional distance sometimes turned into anger. There were moments when words were used like weapons, moments when she felt invisible unless someone needed something from her. She learned to swallow her tears, to nod instead of argue, to endure instead of protest. There were nights she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was all life would ever be. She asked herself if she was destined to repeat the same patterns, to inherit the same pain, to live a life defined by survival rather than joy. Those thoughts scared her, but they also planted a quiet determination deep inside her, even if she didn't recognize it yet. The first time she truly felt broken was not because of one single event, but because of the slow accumulation of disappointments. Dreams she held close were dismissed as unrealistic. Efforts she made were met with indifference. Love, when it appeared, came tangled with conditions and expectations that made her feel like she was never quite enough. She gave too much, trusted too easily, and believed that if she just tried harder, she could earn the care she was craving. When that belief collapsed, it left her feeling hollow, like a house whose walls were still standing but whose foundation had cracked beyond repair. There came a moment when everything she had been holding together finally fell apart. It was a season of losses stacked so close together that she barely had time to grieve one before another arrived. A relationship she thought would save her ended in betrayal. A path she had been working toward suddenly disappeared due to circumstances beyond her control. The few people she thought would stand by her were either too busy with their own lives or simply unwilling to carry her pain alongside theirs. She felt abandoned not just by people, but by the future she had imagined for herself. Each morning became harder to face, each night longer than the last. She reached a point where even breathing felt like work. The world moved on as if nothing had happened, while she felt stuck in the wreckage of everything she had lost. There were days she couldn't get out of bed, days when her thoughts spiraled into dark places she had never allowed herself to explore before. She questioned her worth, her strength, her reason for continuing. The idea that she might not survive crossed her mind more than once, and that realization terrified her. It scared her because part of her believed it, and part of her still wanted to fight it. What should have destroyed her was not just the pain itself, but the loneliness that came with it. Pain, when shared, can be softened. Pain, when carried out,